are live. It looks like the connection is good. Awesome. Okay, so my name is Devin Ulibarri. I'm the executive director for Sugar Labs. We have a guest with us, Anindya Kundu, and we're going to basically just have a conversation to get to know Anindya, who started with Sugar Labs in 2020, and we'll get into how we got involved. But the basic idea is Anindya is a Sugar Labs contributor turned mentor, because now he's mentoring for Google Summer of Code, as well as mentoring others that kind of come to us in the community. And we just wanted to kind of see hear from him how he became involved in Sugar Labs, what he's doing now, what his plans are for the future. And hopefully by watching this, you'll learn a little bit more about, what it's like contributing in Sugar Labs as part of, Google Summer of Code, or maybe, just, coming in as a community member, doing patches and things like that. Yeah, let's get started. I guess in India, maybe we could just start with, how you got involved with Sugar Labs. Like, when exactly was it when you, decided to get involved with Google Summer of Code for Sugar Labs?
Okay. I was a participant as a Google Summer of Code contributor / student developer in the 2020 program. So I was actually in college back then. So I had an internship lined up for the summer, summer of 2020 in Japan, but then it wasn't a great time for the world, right? So that plan got canceled, and I had to do something in the summer. So I came across Google Summer of Code. I already knew about Google Summer of Code, but then I didn't know enough details about it. So I started, finding information, and then I came across Sugar Labs. Actually, I got to know about Sugar Labs from a friend. So I had a friend in college, who had participated in Google Summer of Code 2019. I think I don't quite remember which organization, but he was working on some machine learning projects. So he suggested Sugar Labs. I don't know if he knew enough about that, but then I went to the Google Summer of Code website. I looked up Sugar Labs. I got some information, and then I visited the Sugar Labs website, got more information. Then I came across the Music Blocks project. I also joined the mailing list. So these all happened, around February and March of 2020. And I really like the Music Blocks project. It's like even before Music Blocks, the first time I remember when I visited the Sugar Labs website, or probably on the GitHub page, well, I saw the tagline that says, to this day, I think it says the same thing: learning software for children. And I really found that fascinating, and that's when I joined. So I started contributing. For example, I set up Music Blocks on my local machine and tried to run it. Then I realized, okay, this is sort of a programming playground. So I built a few programs. I went to the guide, learned about it. At that time, I didn't have enough knowledge about music, but then I was just learning, looking at other example programs. And I did that for around 3 weeks, and then it was also time for submitting the proposal. So I think I made a few. I found some bugs. I fixed some bugs, and that's how I got introduced.
Awesome. I'm curious. Something came to mind when you were telling us about that. So, what did you learn about music? You said you didn't really have a background in music. Right. What did you learn about music working on Music Blocks?
Yeah, so I think when you first open the project, I think it used to be the same project what opened up. When you just start Music Blocks for the first time, there are 3 notes, 2 quarter notes, and then you have a half note, and it's all, I think, wrapped around inside of a set instrument. So I was for the first time, I clicked on that and it played the audio, and I was like, okay, this is something. But then I wasn't familiar with any of those constructs. Like, what is a pitch? I know what a pitch is, right? It's a value in hertz, and that's all I knew. It's a frequency, and then there is this note. I had previously, I had some idea of music, of course, but then it wasn't like very theoretical. So I learned about this concept of note. Okay, so it's the duration, and you're playing a pitch, and that was this like the stuff I started with. And then maybe I think I don't exactly remember. It was like 4.5 years back, but I remember going to the guide and trying to do things. I was also like, I found pretty quickly that there is this art section, right? You can use like these instructions to draw stuff on the screen. I was actually familiar with that. I learned logo, I think, when I was in my second or third grade in school. So I was trying to build those, but then music blocks is about music, right? So I read up the entire guide and tried to like understand what these things were. A lot of things didn't really make a lot of sense back then. Things like meter, what a mode is, all of those stuff. So that was my understanding back then. It's like I really knew very little. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it did. And from what you were saying, it sounded like, by, exploring the projects on the planet, by exploring some of the features within music blocks, you learned a little bit more about, what music is.
Mhm.
Um, is that part of what the appeal was for working on this particular project? Was it like the learning aspect? Can you tell us a little bit more about why
Mhm.
you chose this? Because there are many different projects under the umbrella
Right.
Sugar.
Right. Okay. Like I think there are like three things I want to mention. For the very first thing is like when I was just looking for organizations, I was just looking for anything, right? Anything where I could contribute to. When I came across Sugar Labs, of course, I learned okay, there are three projects: Sugar, Sugarizer, and Music Blocks. Sugar was in Python and GTK. I didn't have a lot of experience with Python. It wasn't the best place for me, I felt. But then, Music Blocks and Sugarizer, these were web applications. And by that time, I had a very little understanding of these concepts, at least. So I think I tried to like clone the Sugarizer repository, but then I was having some difficulty facing. I was facing some difficulties, like setting it up. But then, when I cloned the Music Blocks project, it was like very easy to set up. It was a vanilla project, right? So you just clone it and then like start the server, and that's how it was running. Like that was the part how I like why Music Blocks. But then there was also like I had explored other projects too, right? So the reason I stuck with this is that I was really interested in this programming, but then we are doing other things with programming, right? I just mentioned about logo that I learned that thing when I was in my second or my third grade. So like being able to see a relation to that, that really felt like a very, the connection was really nice. And then all the other things that we're doing, I went to the planet, I saw these interesting projects, and I was like, yeah, we're doing programming. I've been doing programming since I was in school, but then this is sort of a new way of doing things, and you're discovering things, you're building things. Sort of you like what we call, I think these days we call it active learning. You learn by doing. I think that was the appeal, and yeah, that's I think that got me hooked.
Yeah, no, that's really validating, I guess, in a certain way. Um, so um, I'm curious to know, a little bit more, like for example, this year we have like 14, between Google Summer of Code and now, Code for GovTech's DMP program, we have 14 students. And I know that when they come to us, they kind of have certain expectations of
Mhm.
what this is going to be like, what their summer is going to be like, because it is a big investment of time. And I'm a little bit curious, like what were your expectations of what the experience would be like to participate, also maybe what your experience was, or sorry, what your expectations were as to what you would get out of it, by the end of the summer. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit more.
Mm.
I'm just curious to know a little bit more about that.
Okay. Uh, I think the very first thing, again, this I think happens to a lot of people in different parts of the world, is that like the program is called Google Summer of Code. The very first part is Google, right? So there is some sort of a prestige associated with. There is some sort of a validation to this, right? That you're not going to be doing something not so great. It's this is going to be at least something that that'll be of some value to you. So when I was preparing for Google Summer of Code, again, early 2020, I didn't have a lot of idea. I mean, I had heard of this, like I said, but then I didn't know much about it. So like I had to like go to the Google website and kind of learn about the program. I had, but then that is never enough. They don't put enough stuff on their website. So like I had to go online and look for more information in other places. So I went to these other forums, Quora, I think Reddit, Medium, and also there were some other independent blogs, and it gave me a little more idea as to like what this program is going to be. So I pretty much understood that I was going to be working on a project pretty much by myself for the most part, for the duration of 3 months. It's a long time. I mean, even if you're
Mm.
doing something that's very suitable for beginners, it's still like over 3 months you can do a lot, right? So yeah, that was one thing. And then I figured out eventually that these organizations, they float these ideas, project ideas that they want to mentor. They want projects created based on these ideas or something close by. So I found the ideas list for Sugar Labs. I sort of for the very first time I was looking at it, I was only interested. I think that year we had like 3 or 4 ideas, and I was looking at 2 ideas. One was this idea about an MVC framework, model view controller, and this other idea is the one that I worked on, the JavaScript export project. So yeah, I mean, just by reading that, it gives you the idea that okay, what you're looking at right now, when you're looking at the project right now, Music Blocks or whatever app you have or whatever other service or software that you have, I mean,
Mm.
this thing is built on top of that. Usually that's the case, right? So, like, that was my impression that I'm going to be building this new feature almost by myself. It's sort of going to be its own standalone thing. That was the expectation. And
Mm.
I was going to get mentored. I think at that time we used to officially have 2 mentors. I mean, now it's like, you have a list of mentors, but there used to be a main mentor, and then, you have this coding mentor. So your main mentor would be assisting you with everything. And then the coding mentor would be like, helping with the code, like what to write and, what kind of code, how to set it up, all the technical details. Yeah, that's basically all I knew. That there are going to be there is going to be some assistance, but then for the most part, I have to build this thing on my own. Maybe I'll have questions answered, but yeah, that's basically what my expectation was.
Okay, so it sounds like you did some research and you named some forums and stuff. That's really interesting for me because I know that there's a lot of chatter on these forums. Um, uh, okay, so maybe tell us like give us some more details about maybe you can show us a little bit about because now you've done it, so maybe you can show us what you created a little bit so that people get an idea of what it is, and then we can kind of go back to
Yeah,
some of these more
absolutely.
abstract questions.
Mhm. Yeah, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to like set up a project, and then I'm going to maybe share my screen and show you like the feature. Just give me a moment.
Yeah, and while you do that, your mentors were Walter Bender and myself, right?
Yes,
Yes.
I think there were 2 other people, Sumit and Vaibhav, but then
Hmm.
they really just helped with the coding part. Walter
Yeah.
was mostly assisting me, so I was meeting Walter almost daily, sometimes twice, thrice a day.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sharing screen. Right, a bit of context before I like show the feature. So this is Music Blocks. I mean, this is a sort of a programming platform that enables you to create projects across music, art, and some programming constructs. So, well, this is how you build programs, right? You use this Lego-like instruction bricks, and you connect them together to form a program. Now, the project was to actually enable the user to, in a way, graduate from programming like this to more conventional programming languages. That are, I mean, those are text, right? So, well, the project idea was that you have a Music Blocks program. You somehow find a way to export this to an HTML file that would have the program written in JavaScript. So the user can actually go through the JavaScript, try to like draw the parallels, like this is how it looks like in Music Blocks, and this is the equivalent JavaScript code. And yeah, that sort of help in a way to help them graduate to JavaScript. I mean, not JavaScript in particular, but again, in a way, how real programming languages work. So again, I didn't do exactly that because I mean there was some technical challenge in doing that. So what I did is I created a feature called a JavaScript editor. So you have a text editor, a JavaScript code editor inside of music blocks that will like enable you to write these programs using the JavaScript API. I mean, I created the API for these programs as well, and I'm just going to show you those. And also translate, whatever program you have written in this, canvas, that will be transpiled to the equivalent JavaScript code. Okay, so this is your program. I'll just click on this button to open the JavaScript editor. Okay, there it is. So yeah, I'll just quickly go over what the program is doing so that I can show you the equivalent code. So this is a MusicBlocks programs. I mean, this is one turtle. So first of all, it's going to clear the screen. It's going to like store some value in a variable called pen color and then set the color to that variable. Okay, and then it's going to do some stuff. All right. First, we set up an instrument, the piano instrument, and then we are going to play 8 notes. So you have one note here, and then well, we have a repeat that's going to like repeat the stuff inside of it 7 times. So that's the current mode length. And again, so it's going to play the note inside of it 7 times. So inside the first note, you have like a pitch playing, that's C3. Like these are all quarter notes, as you can see, 1/4. And like it's also going to do some drawing while it's playing the music. So you have forward 100 steps and then turn right by 45 degrees. I mean, since it's going to play 8 times, I'm going to draw an octagon. That's why it's 360 divided by 8. And every time it's repeating for each iteration, it's going to like increase the color here. So you see like add 10 to pen color. So it's going to increment the variable by 10 and then, set the new color. And then, basically the same thing inside of it. So you have a forward statement and a right statement. And instead of playing the pitch, it's going to do like one step for each iteration from C3. Okay, now I'm going to play this first. Right, so it played an octave and used the piano instrument, and while doing it, it also drew this octagon in different colors. Since I said the color 8 times, it has 8 different colors. So the idea is that the JavaScript code was should be able to do the same thing. So I basically created this API. We can click on this question mark, and that will take you to the API. So this is sort of a guide that tells you how to write these programs in JavaScript, inside of this editor. So you can go over these, and it'll tell you like what functions there are, what constants there are, and other things. And then like if I go back to this, whatever code you have here, that will be transpiled to this equivalent JavaScript code. I'll just go over this too, but I'll just show you how this happens. So yeah, like we have pen color set to 0. I'll just set it to, I don't know, 10. So you see, it still says pen color is 0. So I'm going to click on this button. That's going to regenerate the code. Now you see pen color is 10. So, I mean, this is the exact same code. So you have a clear, and then you set the variable to 10. You set the color to that variable. You set the instrument here, piano. And then inside of it, you are going to play a quarter note that's going to play C3 and do the drawing a little bit, move 100 steps, and then turn right by 45 degrees. Then you have this repeat here. So it's going to convert that to a for loop. It's going to repeat over the mode length. So you see this, less than mode length. So that construct, it's going to update the variable to by 10, and then again set the color, and then play the note with while taking one step at a time for each iteration. That's this line. So this is how it this was the idea. So basically, like I said, there are 2 things. One was to actually generate the API. So you'll be using this API to run MusicBlocks programs, and then these are going to be the exact in a way identical. And then the other part where you're doing the reverse. You're not writing JavaScript programs, but then you're writing MusicBlocks programs, but it converts that to the equivalent JavaScript. So yeah, this was the project. If I clear this thing, and it's going to do the same thing. So I just cleared the screen, and now I'm going to play this program now. Yeah, so you see, it did exactly the same. So that was pretty much what my project was.
Yeah, this is really great. It's also great to have this demo, having you demo this feature. I remember that this was a pretty big lift.
Yeah,
Can
absolutely.
you
That's why I have
what,
this other tangent. Like
well
you can
well
delete this link
before
from
you
it.
before you
Yeah.
go into this, can you maybe tell us,
Mhm.
like what were some of the most challenging things about working on this? Um, and actually, before we talk about that for a second, you said your expectation was little to no mentoring, but then you also said that you were meeting quite regularly with Walter. So would you say
Right.
that that was kind of like exceeding your expectations in terms of like?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like the short answer is yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, what used to happen is like I had been chatting with Walter even before, like I mean, I was accepted into this program. So I was also chatting while I was, doing my general contributions, trying to find bugs and trying to solve other open issues. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, this wasn't in the idea, right? The idea wasn't about creating an editor inside of it. The idea was to generate an HTML file. But then, there were some technical problems. There were some like challenges to how to do that. And like, it would be a standalone thing. Music Blocks is a complex project, right? So Walter and I talked about different ideas and like how this is going to be, how the code is going to look like. I mean, I had some of that in my proposal, but then, by the time I had like completed the project, this syntax was very different from what I had proposed.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, definitely like like meeting with Walter regularly helped. I mean, I was meeting him. I think like we had this like daily meetings, right? Monday through Friday at I think it was 5 p.m. my time. So like that was for all of us. Like I think we had 3 projects that year. But then I was meeting Walter like half an hour early, almost like every other day. So like I had lots of questions, I had lots of things to clarify. And suddenly, I think the more important thing about this program is really the mentoring because I don't think like if I wasn't mentored, I probably wouldn't have created this. I was going to create something very different and maybe even much more limited than what I created.
Yeah, I agree. I think from what I've seen over the years, the mentoring is really key, and that's why we've set up these you know weekly and then, well, like for Music Blocks we have like kind of a bi-weekly meeting with
Hmm.
everybody, and I've been doing one-on-ones weekly, so that kind of adds one more meeting for each one of the students, and then Walter and myself both have office hours. um, it sometimes feels like maybe it could be too much, but at the same time, every single time I meet with somebody, I think we clear something up, and basically, you know, solve a problem before it even gets made. Um,
Yeah.
Great. So as you're working on this, you discovered all sorts of things, you know, uh, that could be done and improved upon, and you were going to show us, you know, uh, what you decided to basically initiate. So, can you tell us, what we call it version 4 now? Can you show us version 4 and how it came, and talk a little bit about how it came to be, what problems it's trying to
Right.
solve, etc.?
Mhm. Okay, okay. So like that, I'll talk over it before I show you that. So yeah, like I said, I had been working on this project over the summer, and then I'd been working about like 2 or 3 weeks before, like before the program as well. I was also like sort of working on this project, yeah, like in the middle of that, after the applications have been submitted and before the results are out. So you have a month in between. Uh, well, I mean, the reason I got into this, this particular project was really because it was really easy for me to start, right? It was just an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript project. It's totally vanilla. Now, there are reasons why that is the case, right? This project was started, well, actually, the precursor to this project on which this is built on, Turtle Blocks, that was started around the time when like the JavaScript ES6 standard, well, the ECMAScript 2015 standard wasn't really there. Well, JavaScript was a very different language before. I mean, it wasn't a very different language, but then the code that we write today, it's very different and much more like in a way, it's much more convenient to write JavaScript than it was before, right? That was one aspect. And then the other aspect was like it was also around the time when Node.js, npm, these were not as much mature. We didn't have frameworks like React and Angular. I mean, they were started, but then like they hadn't like gathered enough traction by then. So that was the reason, like this project was started like any other web project would have been started at that point. In these days we build projects very differently. We have sort of a bundling step. We don't use vanilla technologies. We have some sort of templating for the HTML. We don't like oftentimes we don't use vanilla CSS. We use this thing called Sass. We also like tend to use TypeScript. We use lots of other libraries other people have written. So like all of this was missing in that project. I wouldn't say missing, but then the project like was developed ahead of those. So like, I mean, it like due to that technical reason, well, it was getting harder to maintain the project. The project was growing bigger and bigger, and like we had several problems popping up, right? You'd have bugs every now and then, and like not enough testing ability because again, like the project wasn't built using npm. So like that was one reason. So we wanted to like start afresh because that wasn't going to happen in place, right? Because the technologies are very different. And also the fact that music blocks was developed over the years, I think starting from 2017, that we had learned a lot iterating on different ideas. And then like what happens is that your code becomes more complex because you're iterating on ideas, right? There is a lot of code churn. So like by the time like I completed my project back in 2020, like so the thing was that we had enough knowledge about like if we were to do this from scratch again, right, we would do a better job, right? Because we have much more understanding of what we're doing. So that was another aspect. And also like while we're at it, maybe we want to make this more modular. We want to have a more better foundation for building this, enabling more features that don't exist in music blocks but eventually may be helpful to other people. Also like making it more robust, more optimized. The performance is going to improve, and yeah, just in general going to be a better experience for the user. And that's why I think we discussed the idea about like redoing rewriting this project from scratch, and like after I finished my project that year. And yeah, that's how I think the conversation went.
Yeah, and basically you initiated it.
Yeah, I mean, like if I were to tell you a little bit of, like if I were to give you a bit of information, if you look at my like the submission that year, I had 240 commits over about 51 pull requests. So you can understand the amount of work that was done. So like,
Yeah.
I mean, I really understood. Like by the time I completed the project, I knew this project inside out.
Yeah, I bet. Great. So show us V4 so
Yes.
that we get an idea of what that's like. And I do have some more questions for you, but
Yeah. Okay, just give me a second.
you are the second top contributor with only Walter Bender ahead of you on music blocks. Somewhere here, I could probably find how many lines of code you added.
Quite a few, right? Okay, so well, again, music blocks is in the works. It's far from done, but we're working on it. So, well, okay, it looks quite different from this, right? So you have the menu bar at the top. You have this on the side now. That was one discussion because, and I want to mention this that we have limited screen real estate. Like your menu bar and all of that is already taking up a lot of the vertical space, which is already like narrower than the wider size. So like the idea was to like put that thing on the left side so you have like more screen real estate. Anyway, so I before I digress, like the what we have done so far is like this is using all the new technologies. So this is built on npm. It's a mono repo, so it uses Lerna. It's using TypeScript and React and Sass and all of that. So the way like the I mean, whatever I can show you right now is that we don't have this functionality yet. So we had someone working on this part of the project last year, and we have Karan who's working on this year. So hopefully by the end of the summer, I think we would be in a state where we can try and integrate the brickwork. Well, interestingly, that project is called masonry. So I mean, for now, you have this YAML syntax because this is what actually goes inside. We have this engine that actually runs the program. I mean, this might look a little strange to you, but all it's doing is basically like doing this program representation in a very tree-like format. So this is YAML syntax. So okay, this is we don't have support for music yet, but then we have the graphical part of it done. So it is going to draw stuff. There is this program that is also going to store some stuff in variable. It's going to store some numbers, operate on those, and it's also going to draw. So I'll build this program from here. So it's going to compile this code and like generate the internal structure and get it ready. And when I click on this run button, yeah, it draws this. This is sort of a Fibonacci. I don't have a name for it, but yeah, these are Fibonacci lengths. So this is how where we are with V4. Devin, do you want to add anything I might be missing?
So can you just kind of like paint us a picture of like what we're looking at right now and how the end, you know, where we're
Mhm.
going, or at least our intention right now,
Okay.
how that differs, because right now we're seeing the editor, you had to build things, you're
Mm,
talking about the bricks, but we're not seeing them yet. So maybe just tell us some of the things we're going to see, like a year from now or so.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, again, I'm going to show the Music Blocks V3 screen. So,
Yeah.
like this project, well, under the hood, the architecture, the code layout, everything is very different. Okay, so in V4. So, like one problem that I faced, when I was like trying to generate JavaScript code out of it is like things were very monolithic. I mean, because when you are originally doing something, you're not thinking that one day I'm going to like build a JavaScript editor, right? So you do what works for you at that point. Uh, well, the way this is done is that things are much more modular in this case. So every instruction that you have, it has its own internal counterpart. So like what you have here is just the syntax. This is syntax, this is syntax, and this is syntax. All of it will operate on the same internal data structures. So well, that was one part of it. The other thing is like this is much more robust. The reason we started with like the graphical elements, drawing stuff and just doing the basic programming is because that's easier to do. When you have music, well, things become difficult, right?
Mhm.
So that's something we are yet to do. I mean, definitely, like this is like the brickwork. I mean, I'm calling it masonry. I tend to call it bricks over blocks because, well, this is a block in code. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's one thing. Like the moment you see this in V4, well, V4 will start looking much more like V3. Uh, that is definitely a heavy lift. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, like build that thing. So we're going to do that. And like when we're going to do the music part, one thing that we have to do is like handle concurrency. So you only see one mouse here, right? But in music blocks, if I close this and if I pull out a start block, so you see now you have two mice, right? And they can operate on their own. So like if I these are pretty much independent. So if I have a forward 100 block and if I run this project, so you see like they are independent. They are doing things together at the same time. Like these two lines were all drawn at the same time, right? And
Yeah.
like we want to achieve that, and also like when we try to do that with music, right? We're actually, I mean, it's not music technically, it's audio, right? So what would happen is like you can like if you don't do that correctly, if you don't do the calculations correctly, you're going to hear certain artifacts. Like for example, if two frequencies are close by but then not exactly the same, you're going to hear something called a beat frequency. So those are the challenges that we're trying to solve. And yeah, so like the bigger goals is to like build this thing and then integrate music. And once we're done with those, we're going to create more of these instructions, like pretty much migrate what we have here. And like that will be the bulk of the functionality of music blocks. I mean, we have much more things here, but then we're going to do them slowly. I think one important thing would be to have this like the new version like interoperate with the palette, not the palette, but the project. I think yeah, this is the projects
With the
planet.
yeah, the planet.
Planet. I keep messing those up. Yeah. So yeah, these are the ones I was making. So yeah, I mean, we have lots of projects here, right? So if I go to global, I mean, you have lots of projects, hundreds of these. So I mean, you don't want to go them you don't want them to go to waste, right? So like the problem is like these are done with music blocks v3 syntax, and like what we have here, the internal structures that we have, those are very different. So yeah, we want to find a way to translate in a way from the existing code to the new code. That will be, I think, a big lift.
Yeah, no, this is all really great. I'm going to ask a question I asked
Mhm.
earlier, but I'm going to frame it a little bit differently. Doing all this, what did you learn about solving problems?
Uh, Quite a heavy question, I think. Uh, well, I'm going to take my time to actually come up with an answer. So, well, right. So think
I
about
mean,
it. Like, yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, one of the things I saw that struck me is,
Mhm.
how we, kind of break the problem apart into different
Mhm.
pieces. You know,
Right.
Also the idea of like prototyping and then,
Mhm.
you know, using that as a model. But yeah, now that
Right.
you've had some time to think, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, because I was going to say the exact same thing. So, well, again, I'm going to bring a little bit of my coding, software engineering into this. So, the thing is, like, I used to be a very bottom-up person. So, you tell me to build a software. What I'm going to do is the very first thing I'm going to do is like pull up my editor, like start a file, and then when I have the file open, I'll be like, what do I type? Right. So that was how I used to build things. I used to think in code, and I think that applies pretty much to everywhere else as well, right? When you're trying to solve a problem, you have a bigger objective, right? You try to like that, like think of this problem in a very top-down approach that you have this big milestone that you want to hit in like 6 months, 8 months, 10 months to build something to like get from point A to point B. So what you do is like like I think I've learned that it's important to like break that problem into like achievable milestones. This is something Walter keeps telling me, that I try to like make things too perfect and it never finishes. So it tells me like the like perfect is the enemy of the good enough. So in a way, like I think we need to like solve problems in a very iterative way. We try to like the way Music Blocks was built, right? You come up with something, and then you think of, okay, this is good, but not good enough. Maybe I can do this in a better way. So like go about think of this problem once again, and try to solve it. And in a way, that is what we have been trying to incorporate this year. When I've been mentoring Karan, I've been my mentoring this year has been very different from the previous 3 years, right? So like the very first thing I told him is like, don't start with the code. Think of this problem that you are given. You have to build this framework from scratch, right? Think of the expectations that like think of the things that are expected out of it. So like what are the functional specifications? You write them down. These are the things it's going to do. These are the things that these are going to be the interactions. This is how it's going to look like. At this point, nothing is being implemented, right? And then the next step, we came up with these like four paths to it, right? There are these individual four large units to this masonry project. Again, I'm bringing the project for explaining. So we like I asked him to think about, okay, how the different units are going to intercommunicate with each other. Like what are the pieces of information that are going to flow between them? What is the information getting into the system and out of the system? And then you get to the technical part of it as to like how you're going to implement it, right? I think that applies to anything, because let's say you're in school, and like you're given a project, project you submit at the end of your class term, right? So again, if you think, okay, this is, if you get involved, that has happened to me while I was in school, right? I used to directly get involved with the very specifics of it and like waste a lot of time. So I have suddenly learned to not do it that way. So like the what I'm trying to explain is like what I've learned over the years is that bottom up is one way of doing things. You get down from the specifics and like hope that everything comes together as one unit. But then the other way is to like think of it top down. You have one item that it's like a pyramid. I'm showing this my so it starts from one idea, then it breaks down into smaller units and smaller units, and at every level you're adding details. You have very little detail when you start, and then as you go into it, that's when you're actually expanding your horizon. I don't think this is what you're expecting.
No, this no, this is good, and it did make me think of another question, if I may.
Yeah.
You mentioned, how you were doing things, in school, and you did kind of touch upon this a little bit, but, you know, I'm curious to know like how the kind of coding you did here differed from what you learned at school, and um, yeah,
Right.
so talk to that a little bit.
Right. I'm gonna take like 3 or 4 minutes and tell you my life story. So I mentioned this that I was like in a way introduced to programming when I was in my second or third grade, through Logo. I mean, it was just forward, FD40, RT90, repeat 360, all of that. And then for 2 years I was like we were being taught PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, and all of that. I was in my fourth grade, fifth grade, and what used to happen is like when we used to go to the computer lab, to create, we were being taught PowerPoint, and like I was not really interested in the in the static sites where you have just a title and then you have somebody. I was more interested in trying to do things with it, right? So I used to like some of my friends might remember this. So I used to create these quiz applications in PowerPoint. So used to for each slide you'd have a question and then 4 buttons. If you clicked on the correct answer, it will take you to the next slide. If you clicked on the wrong answer, it will take you to the last slide. Using hyperlinks. So that would say, okay, you selected a wrong answer, something like that. And then and then when I was in my sixth grade, so towards the end of my sixth grade, we were taught a bit of Visual Basic. So that is when I thought we're going to build software. You have these text boxes and you got to take those values and write some Visual Basic to do some math. That had happened, and then well, that didn't last very long. And then by the end of the seventh grade, I think we were programming in Java. uh, that went around. So I was doing these Java programs. Eventually, I somewhere, I don't know from how I ended up doing those, but I ended up learning some C++, some Python. But then these programming that I was doing was very different from general software engine, like software development that we do today. So like these programs were much more academic, right? You are being taught the concepts of programming. You are being taught these data structures, these algorithms, these particular ways of how to like solve some programming, like question, programming problem in a very optimal way. That's what we were doing in school, right? And then I wasn't really connecting with that because you write those programs in a terminal, so you have this black window, you just type some text, and then you get some text printed out. I mean, I wasn't really happy with those. I was more like this is not software I relate to. But software to me were like applications, right? That would have images, buttons, and text, and colors, all of that. So I like in a way I took it upon myself to like go and learn that instead. So around 2016, I picked up some. I tried to learn how to build Android applications. Back then we didn't have as many YouTube tutorials that we have today. So you only had like 3 or 4. So I went and watched those and tried to follow, and my computer was really crap. So to run an Android application, you need some good hardware. And I built a few applications. I'm really proud of one application. Like I built, it was actually a learning application for toddlers. You wouldn't believe. So we have these like little books for toddlers. Like you have these pictures, and then they have the like whatever it's called written out. So the program, what the application would do is like you have these images. You click on that, you tap on that, so it's going to play the sound of what it's called. So I built stuff like those. I did a few more other things. Then this is again in college. By the time I was in college, I was doing again college work, right? Again, much more academic programming. But again, I picked up some other things. Like I was learning to build these robots using Arduino Kit. I was learning some computer vision in Python, some AI here and there. And finally, like towards the end, I was like, again, I'm probably not getting anywhere. I'm not getting the feel of what an application is supposed to be like. So I started web development. I'm going to do a little bit of an advertisement. I'm not getting paid to do this, but there's this awesome website called w3schools.org. It's either org or .com. So that is where I learned web development. So it has very good explanation of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And like I learned that stuff, and then I wrote a few games, Minesweeper, Ludo, Sudoku, all of that in just JavaScript. But then everything I had been doing until that point, think of it, I started at around the age of 11 or 12 in school, trying to do some programming. And then this is 2019 when I actually started learning web development. And that's been quite a while in between. I was building these small programs, that really wasn't satisfying me. So that is when I, in 2020, when I joined uh, this Summer of Code program, I was like, Music Blocks is a big project, right? It has lots of files, lots of folders, lots of code going on. Each file used to have like 5,000. Yeah, there were files that used to have like 12,000 lines of code in them. This is a massive project. There are a lot of interdependencies, a lot of code that's talking to other code, and all of that. So I think that was sort of the jump, the shift that I saw, that we are writing these little programs that hardly do anything, and we have these giant applications that have so much code, and yet you only see so much on the UI. So that's how I was graduated.
No, that's a great story, and I think that hearing that's going to be helpful for other people to kind of understand, what Sugar Labs is about, what constructionism education is about, as opposed to like instructionism, just like, this is what I know, I'm just gonna like tell you what I know. Because basically the visual programming language that we're creating is like an unsolved problem, and that's the reason it's so ambitious. It's like we don't we know I mean, we can feel when we achieve our goal, which is good. That means it's a meaningful task. But at the same time, how we get from A to B, that there's no textbook, there's no like back of the textbook that's going to have the roadmap for how to do that, which is both exhilarating and challenging. And one of the things that we say a lot, about like constructionism education is it's hard fun. It's fun when you solve these problems, and you put the pieces together. It is challenging, but that is kind of part of the fun. So I was hearing all of that in what you were, saying. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I want to kind of switch gears here, because this is kind of like what you were doing, years ago, and you've touched
Right.
a little bit upon what you're doing today, and where we're going with V4. But I know that you've had other successes as well. So maybe you could talk about some of the other things you're doing, maybe also within Sugar Labs, but then also elsewhere, in your professional life.
Right. Right. Okay. I'm going to start with Sugar Labs because that's how it all started. So again, recap. I was a student developer. Again, this is an official term Google used. I don't know if they use it anymore because it's now no longer just for university students. So it used to be called student developer. So that was 2020. Okay. So then you can call me. I was a contributor first, and then like a student developer, and after that I started becoming a maintainer. Right. I was maintaining issues and bugs and pull requests and other contributions to Music Blocks version 3, Music Blocks as it stands today. And thereafter, like after I took the initiative to actually like drive this version 4 rewrite, it's this big thing. So again, I was in a way a maintainer. I was leading the project. Again, I just want to mention that again, I didn't think I was really ready to do that because again, I only had so much experience with large projects, right? So I went from being like a beginner to slightly an intermediate. And also while this was happening, 2021 came up, and like that year I was mentoring projects. So that was also the year when we were thinking of actually starting the code of Music Blogs version 4. And this was also my first time mentoring projects. Again, I didn't have enough information or enough knowledge or enough experience to do any of that. I think I wasn't great that year. I mean, I know for a fact I wasn't great that year. I wasn't great the next year too. I don't think I was. I think over the years I was slowly getting better because I was learning what doesn't work. In a way, I learned by failing. That okay, this is not how things are going to be. And also, like at the same time, I joined my professional work. So I was also like building stuff there, and taking all of this together. I was really getting more used to actually building software in general, right? So I was growing from a beginner to, like I said, an intermediate, and like it's been 4 years at this point. So I have like I think I've learned a lot. So again, technically I have been a maintainer. like since like and after I finished my Summer of Code project that year. So yeah, that's what I've been doing for Sugar Labs. Generally, for the most part, just maintaining the V4 project and developing that. Uh, well, outside of work, outside of Sugar Labs, well, I work as a software engineer remotely at Sorcero, which is a company based in DC. So Sorcero offers an AI platform that enhances life sciences decision making by integrating medical data to provide actionable insights. Also pursuing a master's degree in computer science from Georgia Tech. This is also an online program. I totally stay at home. So I've been like I started last year, I think in the spring, in the spring semester last year. So I'm done with like about 60% of the requirements of the degree, and I hope to graduate sometime next year. So I've been working professionally. I have been like pursuing the master's degree, and I've also been doing Sugar Labs work.
Great. It amazes me how you keep it all together. But you do it with grace, and we really appreciate you staying an active member of the community. I am curious, and I'm sure others seeking to be, I think we call them contributors nowadays, Google Summer of Code contributors. If you could give them like any advice, because I know that they're all understandably a little bit anxious about their future, etc., their prospects of getting into Google Summer of Code, and also like what they might need to do to prepare. But do you have any advice?
Yeah. I'm going to say a few things. Well, to start with, well, I think people need to understand Google Summer of Code is not an internship at Google. So Google sponsors this program so that people generally people in universities, but now it's open for anyone to actually get their feet wet in software development of different kinds. You're building applications, somewhere you're building services, somewhere you're doing other things. Depends really on the organization. So in a way, like Google sponsors these projects that you do with an organization, an open source organization. And over the duration of these 3 months or so, you build these different projects, and like definitely like depending on the needs of the organization. Uh, Also, like in a way, like projects are of different levels. Some are beginner friendly, some are more intermediate friendly. So the main thing is like you are definitely writing some code in some form because the program says Google Summer of Code. So yeah, like I mentioned before, I think that you're going to be building a project almost by yourself. You're going to have help, from the mentors, from the community, from the organization. But then it's like for you to learn, and you have to like try and pick up the pieces. So it's definitely like if you're going to work on a project that involves computer vision and you have no idea what that is, but definitely that's not something you should try, right? But then like maybe you prepare a little ahead of time and look through the organizations of the previous years and like what projects they had, what kind of projects. And like every time every year, when we complete the program, like every project, like whoever is doing the project, they also have to submit a write-up, so that details what they did and what their project was about and all of that information. It's also like it's not short, there is a lot of information. Maybe you can try and like people can, I think, go over those. You can on the Google website also, I think you can filter down organizations, filter by tech stack. If you know JavaScript, maybe you just go and search JavaScript. That's one aspect as to like what is the bare minimum that's required to get into. But then it's not just about that something and then you're going to go and like build this project. Like Google gets a lot of applications every year, and they only select a handful of those, right? I think they select roughly around 100 projects across 150 or 200 organizations. So I think it's important to also like show some participation with the organization, that go to the GitHub. I mean, it really depends on the organization, where they host their code, how they do their work. Uh, Generally, I think organizations have their own way of their own process of how they do things, and there is some guidelines somewhere. So I think the general idea is like go and try to fix. First of all, go and try to understand the projects they are maintaining, and then once you like start like using those software projects yourself, and that's when you start trying to understand how it works, the code that's written, the other things that are involved, all the write up, all the documentation, all of that. And then maybe your next step would be to, like, I think, start with like trying to do, like, maybe fix some issues or trying to implement a small feature. Usually like on GitHub, these organizations have labels. One of the labels, I think, is called good first issue. So
Mhm.
maybe that is a very, very good starting step. And then like, yeah, I mean, once you get into this thing, I think it's, again, everyone's experience is going to be different. Like what I did may not apply to anybody else, or it may apply to almost everyone else, right? So I think, I think the important part is to start. Also, like, getting involved with the community, because when I like started this, I had no communication with Sugar Labs. So I figured out, I saw some wiki somewhere, and then I came across this mailing list. So I joined the mailing list. So I'm getting all the mails everybody else is getting. So I can, try to, like, read through whatever I understand, and maybe I get some hint somewhere as to like what to do. But I think the main step is to get started by, to like find something for yourself, and then try to contribute.
Awesome. We are at the final minute. So I want to thank you, in India, for your time. I want to thank anyone watching this either now or in the future. I'm sure this is going to be a valuable resource for people doing research on Sugar Labs, especially for Google Summer of Code or any other contributions. You can go to our website, sugarlabs.org. You can find a lot of information, especially near the bottom. There's a link to our GitHub page. There's a link to music blocks, so you can try that. GitHub page will take you to our main page, and you can find music blocks there. You can also find music blocks v4. Looks like you might have to scroll down a little bit, but all the repositories are over here. If you're able to make a donation, there's a link right here. Just click on that, and there's information on how to donate to Sugar Labs, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. So again, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to our upcoming events, which will showcase some of our contributors this year. Okay.
Thank you for having me.